Okay, so think about this. What if that number we obsess over, the IQ score, isn't the whole story when it comes to success? We've kind of put IQ on this pedestal for ages, right? Thinking it's all about brain power, raw logic. But then why do we see super smart people, like really high IQ folks, sometimes crash and burn in their careers, or struggle with relationships, or just not seem happy? Today, we're going to challenge that idea, the sort of tyranny of the IQ score. We're doing a deep dive into the thinking around Daniel Goleman's huge 1995 book, Emotional Intelligence, Why It Can Matter More Than IQ. And our mission for you is to really unpack Goleman's main point, that this other thing, emotional intelligence, or EQ basically, how well you get your own feelings and other people's feelings, is often way more important for a truly successful life.
Yeah, and it's good to remember Goleman didn't just invent this out of thin air. He was really building on the work of psychologists like Peter Salovey and John Mayer. He took their academic ideas and gave them this really practical, almost biological framework that just clicked with people everywhere. The whole thing really kicks off with this idea about how we're wired internally. Goleman puts it quite directly in the book, something like, in a very real sense, we have two minds, one that thinks and one that feels. And understanding how those two minds work together, or sometimes against each other, that's really the core of this deep dive.
Okay, let's get into that collaboration then, because that difference between book smarts and emotional smarts, that's the whole game here. Goleman isn't dismissing IQ entirely. It still matters, right?
Yeah.
It gets your foot in the door, gets you the interview. But the big idea, the thing that sums it all up, is kind of like IQ opens doors, but it's EQ that keeps them open, and maybe even decides what you actually build once you're inside.
That's a great way to put it. And it lines up perfectly with how Goleman breaks down EQ. It's not just one vague feeling. He identifies 5 specific parts, 5 components, and they build on each other. Crucially, he says, awareness has to come before you can even think about control. You need to know what's going on first.
Right. You can't manage what you don't recognize. Yeah. Makes sense. So let's walk through these 5 pillars, starting with the internal stuff, how we manage ourselves.
Exactly. First up is self-awareness. This is the absolute foundation. It's knowing your moods, your emotions, what drives you, and crucially, how all that affects other people. It's more than just saying, oh, I feel bad. It's being able to say, okay, I'm feeling really stressed right now, and I know when I feel stressed, I tend to get snappy. That kind of insight.
And it's funny, a lot of really driven people, high achievers, they sometimes just power through without this step.
Yeah.
They're so focused outside, they don't clock what's happening inside until, bam, crisis hits. Goleman suggests self-aware people kind of know their own internal weather patterns. They're less likely to be blindsided by their own reactions.
Precisely. And that awareness naturally leads to the second pillar, self-regulation. Once you know you're feeling stressed or angry or whatever, self-regulation is the ability to, manage it, to control those impulses, redirect those disruptive feelings. Goleman basically defines emotional maturity here as responding thoughtfully instead of just instantly reacting.
That pause.
Yeah.
That ability to just insert a moment between feeling something and acting on it, that feels incredibly important, maybe especially now. It stops you from sending that angry email, right? Or making a rash decision out of panic. It's about thinking long-term instead of just immediate feeling.
Yes. Then third, we have motivation. But this isn't just any motivation, it's internal drive. It's passion for the work itself, sticking with goals because you care about them, not just for the paycheck or the status. This kind of purpose-driven motivation, the sources say, it's much more resilient. It keeps you going when things get tough, more than just chasing external rewards does.
Like the student who gets a bad grade, but is genuinely fascinated by the subject. They don't just give up. They figure out how to learn it better because they want to know that intrinsic thing.
Exactly. That's the resilience piece. Okay, so the last 2 pillars shift outward towards how we deal with other people. Number 4 is empathy. This is huge. It's the ability to tune into and understand where other people are coming from emotionally. Goleman is clear. Empathy isn't about agreeing with them. It's about seeing the world from their emotional viewpoint, taking their feelings seriously. It's the bedrock of kindness, really.
Yeah, and you see this play out in leadership all the time. A manager just gives out tasks. A real leader. They understand their team. They know who's stressed, who's motivated by what. If someone's struggling personally, an empathetic leader tries to support them, not just dock their pay for missing a deadline. It builds loyalty.
Which flows right into the 5th and final pillar. Social skills. This is where it all comes together. It's the outward expression of the other 4. It means you're good at managing relationships, building networks, communicating clearly, handling conflicts, leading teams. People high in social skills aren't just nice, they're effective. They build rapport, find common ground.
Okay, so those five: self-awareness, self-regulation, motivation, empathy, social skill. It sounds good, maybe a bit soft. How does Goleman connect this to like actual brain science? Where's the biology?
This is where Goleman really made waves. He connects it directly to our neurology. He talks about our two systems: the fast emotional system run mainly by the amygdala, and the slower, more logical system in the neocortex, particularly the prefrontal cortex, the thinking brain.
And the problems kick in when the amygdala, the emotional part, kind of hijacks the system, right?
Exactly. Goleman calls it the emotional hijacking. And here's the key bit of wiring he highlights. The neural pathways from our senses to the amygdala are much shorter and faster than the pathways to the neocortex. So in a tense moment, the amygdala gets the signal first and yells threat, react, microseconds before the thinking brain has even fully processed what's going on, let alone figured out a sensible response. That tiny head start is why feelings can just overwhelm logic sometimes, leading to those things we later regret saying or doing.
Wow, okay. So the emotional brain is wired for speed, for survival, not necessarily for complex social situations. That immediate reaction is the hijack. And Goleman points out that our childhood, how we were taught or shown how to handle emotions by parents and teachers, deeply shapes how often these hijackings happen to us as adults.
Absolutely. And if you zoom out from the brain wiring, you see just how crucial mastering this stuff, mastering EQ really is. This is the so what for everyday life. Take the workplace. EQ often decides who gets promoted from being technically good at their job to being a genuine leader. Think about a big project failing. A low EQ boss might just erupt, blame everyone, create fear.
Right. Whereas the high EQ leader, they take a breath first, self-regulation, they stay calm, then they use empathy to understand the team's stress and motivation skills to figure out, okay, how do we fix this? Goleman argues this is why high EQ is so valuable in complex jobs. These leaders build trust, handle pressure without breaking the team.
And then in relationships, the source is constantly underlying EQ as the oil that keeps human connections running smoothly. It's not just about trust. It's about managing conflict constructively. People with high EQ aren't trying to win fights. They're trying to understand. They manage their own defensiveness so they can actually hear the other person.
And there's a health angle too, isn't there? Goleman links poor self-regulation to chronic stress, that constant flood of stress hormones like cortisol. So managing your emotions isn't just good for your relationships, it's literally good for your body.
Yeah,
It helps protect against anxiety, depression, all that stress-related stuff.
definitely. And finally, education. Goleman's ideas have had a massive impact here. He really pushed for teaching emotional literacy in schools, giving kids the words for their feelings, teaching them how to handle disagreements, how to control impulses. The thinking is, if we teach this early, we get better functioning adults, better citizens.
Okay, but we should probably mention, the criticisms or limitations people point out in the reviews. While the ideas are powerful, the book itself, it's not exactly a quick how-to manual, is that? It reads more like a deep dive into the theory and science. So if you're looking for like 5 easy steps to boost your EQ, you might find the detailed explanations and case studies a bit slow going. It's heavy on the why.
That's a fair point. It's more foundational than a practical workbook. But even with that said, the absolute core message is incredibly hopeful, I think. Unlike IQ, which tends to stabilize relatively early in life, EQ is not fixed. Goleman stresses this. It can be learned. You can develop it, improve it throughout your entire life. It's a skill set you build with practice, with mindfulness, by getting feedback, by consciously forming new habits.
And you can see the impact. Since '95, this book hasn't just sold millions. It fundamentally shifted how companies, even the military, think about what makes someone capable. It broadened the definition of smart beyond just test scores.
So the big takeaway, the conclusion we really want you to hold on to is this. True success, and maybe even happiness, isn't just about your grades or your raw intellect. It really hinges on understanding people, including yourself, and managing those interactions effectively. Emotional mastery, as Goleman frames it, is probably the most powerful tool you have for growth and achievement.
So to recap the blueprint, it starts inside with self-awareness, which lets you practice self-regulation. That fuels your internal motivation. Then you look outward with empathy, which finally enables effective social skills, all while keeping that speedy amygdala in check, letting the rational neocortex have its say.
Exactly. Which brings us to our final thought for you. If we accept Goleman's core idea that EQ is learnable, that it's a skill you can practice, then think about this. What's the one recurring, maybe negative emotional habit you have? Could be getting defensive instantly, maybe constant worrying, or that quick flash of irritation. What if you decided, starting today, to just practice pausing? Just insert a tiny pause before you react in that specific situation. Goleman suggests that pause. Well, that's where emotional freedom begins.